Why is there risk of a coming plague, engineered, intentionally deployed to crush freedom, limit travel, and murder of vast numbers targeted by eugenicists? There has been a pattern for years of Wall Street and Epstein-class billionaires buying up large doomsday bunkers. What do they know that we don't? What are they planning? Would they warn us if they could profit from letting us die in a sudden collapse? Or are mass casualties useful in plots to restrict free speech and upward mobility of the working poor? Why do I believe globalist assets are preparing for a doomsday plague? Throughout history, the holy book of the political Zionists has been translated, and this led to pogroms and purges against innocent Jews. Many events in history called blood libels were exposed by IDF TikTok as not just true, but understated when the Talmudist creatures have total impunity to abuse civilians. We must be cautious to differentiate between NWO bad actors and the whistleblowers like Max Blumenthal, Miko Palad, Norman Finkelstein, Gideon Levy. Dark times in the past coincided with accusations of spreading plagues, poisoning wells, and doing dirty business with Goyim. This idea is not to hang a jacket on innocent Jews or to misinterpret the facts. This is speculation based on evidence, quotes, patterns, and recent developments. Studying books by Noam Chomsky, Christopher Ballin, Whitney Webb, and other critics of the Cabal are important to see the layers of the Zionist mind control parasite. In the Talmud, there are commands to cheat Christians, kill all Goy, lie about the content of the Talmud, and wipe out the women and children of Amalek. With the admitted statements of leading Zionist politicians to nuke Gaza to kill the children. Eilat Shakid called little snakes so they don't grow up to challenge the Zionoids and policies exposed by Israeli dirty money, bribes, and rigged campaign finance. I believe that in a time called the Great Noticing, where Israel has near total impunity with their Trojan horse agents in the US government, that there is a plan to wipe out majority of humanity. This coincides with William Blum's book, Rogue State, that describes a program for racially specific bioweapons during his time in the State Department. This same book talks about work on autoimmune deficiency virus research. This was a joint project in the Kennedy era with apartheid South Africa, the CIA, and Israel to wipe out their minorities. With developments of major campaign financiers buying bunkers around the world, Israeli spies creating walled compounds in the San Fernando Valley, the alarm of Argentina and Cyprus locals of massive Israeli land grabs to create areas non-Israeli assets are not allowed to enter. I believe this is the opening stages of a massive false flag event that coincides with global lockdowns and collapse of society. Let's talk about well-known events that merge surveillance claims, censorship, end to free speech and travel. Making claims of InfoWars, David Icke and Bill Cooper pale to the truth of COVID. That was also how the DNC burned Bernie Sanders the second time. We are seeing major land grabs by Wall Street predators, the Epstein-class Zionist political donors, into what looks like plans for end-of-the-world-type fortifications. Elon Musk in Texas, Larry Ellison on Lanai, Mark Zuckerberg in Maui, large projects around Jackson Hole, Mount Weather Complex, Virginia, and the crazy mountains of Wyoming. It seems like everything evil is put off on Nazi doctors like Mengele or Japanese Unit 731, but little is exposed on the crimes of Jewish doctors in the Americas and UK. Equally grave crimes of intentional poisoning, vivisection, and mind control drugs were also part of Western Cold War experiments. This was exposed by Annie Jacobson and Tom O'Neill to include ritualistic sex abuse and trauma-based mind control to create mass shooters. Hollywood and the monopoly media seems to step around these well-documented acts of evil, because unlike the Nazis, if anything, the Zionist infrastructure of Wall Street, military-industrial complex, war-based economy, and London bankers' power has only expanded with shills in government supposed to be watchdogs elected from lawyers and lobbyists of the most guilty companies. Tavistock Institute in the UK, MK Ultra in American and Canada, Project Coast, apartheid-era South Africa, Soviet biopreparat, so-called Manchurian candidate brainwashing of North Korea, Cold War labs that pushed ethical boundaries. That's not speculation, that's documented. Many lost careers for speaking out, were silenced from social media, harassed by lawfare, and isolated by the post-9/11 snitch culture promoted by our shill media. Knowing that, it's rational to ask hard questions when new tech accelerates what's possible. Gene editing, AI protein design, rapid DNA synthesis, all part of illegal bioweapons programs. The United States, Canada, and UK claim don't exist, despite multiple deaths and whistleblowers risking their lives to expose the truth. I believe what is coming will be a multi-pronged attack to cover up for the massive criminal revelations in recent years of Western governments supporting Al-Qaeda and ISIS as just the tip of a haunting iceberg of crimes against humanity by the CIA, Mossad, and NATO. What I believe is coming will be a staged terror event and plague that spread side by side to reorganize the world into a rich artificial ruling class, corporate feudalism that will restrict elections to landowners and keep everyone else in their homes under house arrest and martial law. The risk of a staged event like the sarin attack we framed Assad with could pale in the face of a nuclear attack carried out by the same interests that planned and profited from both 9/11 and October 7th in Wall Street, D.C. and Tel Aviv. There is a desire by the criminals behind the Gaza genocide of the last several decades to enact something called the Yinon Plan, as exposed by Christopher Ballin. This will be nothing short of World War III. Mass starvation, rigged financial markets, domestic state killings, torture, and police state checkpoints. This will be the climate for a world war that redraws the map and centers control around Tel Aviv and London ruling class. I believe the divisions in media pushing left versus right violence in the USA will be the foundation for a civil war pushed by the police state to balkanize the world's largest Christian countries, doomed due to infighting. The response will be an engineered virus that ends all human rights protections where any dissident can be labeled as infected, murdered, and buried in mass graves. This is not a wild claim or accusation. This was the Cold War policy to Central America during Iran. Contra. Mass murders in Gaza and Vietnam Phoenix program are just a small part of destabilization projects, School of the Americas and coups done in our name. Gaza graves full of doctors, journalists, and teachers should enlighten us on the mentality of the criminals who rule over us using thermobaric weapons to hide death tolls as whole communities are evaporated. If you study the work of Whitney Webb, John Potash, Chris Hedges, you will see the blueprint for global enslavement under a crushing nexus of police state, proxy terror, false flags, engineered violence, and social unrest that is the bread and butter of CIA, Mossad, and MI6. America has long been called the Golden Calf, referring to Mosaic myth of the Bible, where the people worshipped a false effigy of an Egyptian god. Netanyahu has made statements about wanting to carve up Americans for profit until the dried husk of the nation falls apart and blows away because that's what we do to countries we hate on a hot mic. This is already what happened to Libya, Syria, Iraq, and much of the Balkans. This is a world where the police and intelligence agencies are controlled by the most sinister Bond villain-type criminals, and as their crimes in the third world become absolute, the values of the people raised on talking points about similar crimes that illegitimize the rule of Gaddafi and Saddam or Hitler. There is a feeling of rage in the people against our own governments that mirror these despots. This is how, in history, the Talmudists have stoked civil wars, holy wars, Protestant versus Catholic, West versus East, colonialism, and the slave trade, creating conditions for military-age males to die by the millions in Zionist plots to protect the ruling class against revolution, except where it serves their purposes. As thousands of IDF war criminals run around freely on vacation, driving supercars, buying up mansions with no verifiable income, besides as spies or placeholders for Wall Street hedge funds, the circumstantial evidence for a massive Zionist crimes in the making that would make COVID or September 11th seem like non-events. All over social media, Zionists are saying there will be a new Pearl Harbor-type event, telegraphing their desire for a false flag to distract from Mossad child abuse rings at the highest levels of politics and Hollywood. The people are not falling for any more AIPAC wars or interested in sending their children to die for Ashkenazi prophets in Ukraine or Iran. The only option these Likud creeps have is using their influence in compromised media under the Trump regime to doom humanity. This will not be a simple flu or pandemic that drowns the already aging or sick with respirators and drugs to flood the lungs. This is not about Trump insider trading investments into medical mask mandates or suspicious stock market irregularities, like days leading up to September 11th and October 7th. This will be a fundamental change to the nature of life on Earth. I believe what is coming will be unrest, staged violence, mass assassinations, police purges, military checkpoints, forced injections, and large-scale disappearances of critics of the regime. This may be blamed on Antifa, Mid-East jihadis, or even right-wing extremists, but don't believe any lie of the media to take your rights. Just like Waco, Texas Branch Davidians, Philadelphia move arson 1985, Hurricane Katrina murder of black gun owners, Obama attempts to frame veterans as too dangerous to own guns. The police state advances similar goals, no matter what puppet is in office, because the end goal is only the rich to be armed, the middle class destroyed, and the children of the poor to be fed to rich, cannibalistic pedophiles, billionaire vampires, or pharmavivisection. Take that literally or figuratively. The next series of Israel wars could begin with a sudden attack. Nuclear weapon detonated against one of our bases or cities, but as Trump and his cabal of Israeli spies and dual nationals face prison internationally, their likely haven is the USA until a policy change or mass call for justice for the crimes of Gaza and Syria. Most likely, Trump can't do hard prison time, so there will be an attempt by the AIPAC enemies of the Constitution to end elections, lock down the nation, and round up anyone who has ever spoken out against the Zionist death cult and compromised politicians. We are seeing all the nightmares of JFK, Eisenhower, Truman, Patton, and murdered journalists come true. Plans for social credit systems, mechanized murder armies, domestic reign of terror against the press and Constitution. There is no loyalty that won't be abused in the service of predatory billionaires who have hateful Talmudic secret teachings that are so vile and ghastly every time they were translated in history led to inquisition, arrested bankers, and dead pedophiles. A false flag or market crash will begin in a climate of mass layoffs of coders who have no life skills outside of building websites or backends on cell phones or social media. In the most likely event of an EMP attack, food shortages, Wall Street buying up homes to inflate markets and create artificial housing shortages will make a desperate and cunning implosion of Western society. This is in conjunction with policies to destroy our family farms already starving due to tariffs, water scarcity for favoritism towards massive corporate projects as bankster lobbyists move into cannabis industry, or use gangster tactics like the Zionist Resnick family in San Joaquin Valley. As the former middle class are going to become suddenly without a way to eat or find shelter. At the same time as homelessness is criminalized, you will see vast numbers of suicides, police shootings, and more chillingly, people just gone without a trace. Sold for sex slavery, vivisection for organ harvest, and secret space program missions to other solar systems. Before I get into crimes of political Zionists, I want to emphasize that this is not about Jews. The Netanyahu regime and Likud party are criminals, war profiteers, schemers, and the crimes of their false flags, theft and systemic abuse of human beings, is not the work of reform. Orthodox or conservative Jews not involved. The racist and supremacist ideas of Likud are not shared by a large number of non-Zionist Jews. The fingerprints of these Likud criminals and American neocons have been on many suspicious acts of terror to benefit war profiteers and oil lobbyists across the world. Syria is the most flagrant example that Zionism, ISIS, and Al-Qaeda have always shared goals and logistics. If you look back on September 11th, there were hundreds of Israeli spies arrested. The destabilization against the Assad regime included countless acts of terror, gassing civilians, beheadings and massacres of Christians and Palestinian refugees, to smuggle oil to Europe, weaken the region for white supremacist oil policy, and clear land for Greater Israel, bringing together a satanic pact of outside groups willing to drown civilians in blood to steal oil. Having been exposed by the independent press in America, many sources of information on this dirty war were censored, like InfoWars, Veterans Today, Mint Press, Redacted Tonight, Empire Files, Days of Revolt, and now NPR. This also correlates with the hacking of the onboard computer of Rolling Stone journalist Michael Hastings' Mercedes-Benz. It is clear the crimes of the Israel First faction of Likud support on U.S. soil is a threat to the world. No other group in history has devoted so much time to lobbying for war, surveillance, censorship, torture, assassination, and other toxic tenets of the Zionist mind control parasite behind secret societies and unlimited dirty money. It has long been said when fascism comes to America, it will be wrapped in fake patriotism and corrupt politics of the murder-inked dirty money infrastructure, false Jews, fake Christians, and the Wall Street gangsters who truly hate our freedom. Similar to mass murderer Netanyahu, who has spent his life pushing to violate the sovereignty of America under the 9/11 coup. Christopher Ballin exposed as the Oded Yanon plan. Trump has crept into politics from the sewer of a multinational crime group that bleeds through neocon and neoliberal puppets for the Epstein political class, offshore loyalties that uses unlimited funds, political pressure, death threats, and an organized molestation ring to compromise the ruling class for Rothschild, Saudi, and criminals. Inciting atrocity creeps behind the New World Order. Since the time of true believers and straight shooters in peace and justice, robbed of life in the 1960s by Project 40 Bay of Pigs cabal, exposed in E. Howard Hunt's deathbed confession, we have been suffering under an intelligent stranglehold against the values outlined in the Bill of Rights, Federalist Papers, and Declaration of Independence by think tanks, oligarchs, multinational corporations, and unregulated monopolies, destroying our republic with inflated currency, destroying our manufacturing centers with foreign slave labor, decreasing quality of goods for shareholder greed and petrodollar hegemony. These secret societies that infected our tech, Hollywood, news media, arms sector, banks, and evangelical groups have been the curse of the Talmudist mafia that has been trying to strangle democracy in its crib since 1812, finally dooming us despite the threats warned of by Thomas Jefferson of central banks by 1913. We must re-examine the vast conspiracy of laws odious to the Constitution, pushed by insects who work behind the veil of secrecy to proliferate illegal, unconstitutional foreign and domestic policies. We must begin to unravel this vast conspiracy with a bold and united goal to get back to the simple and honorable ideals of the Founding Fathers for a just government that works for the people, not shadowy lobbyists of AIPAC, ADL, CFR, World Bank, Heritage Foundation, London bankers, Tel Aviv gangsters, or Jerusalem maniacs who force garbage policies, rigged elections with outside pressure of globalists, whose crimes pale in comparison to what we suspect as their ultimate goal is endless atrocities that burn the people of the world in a forever war far beyond plans for World War III. This shadow government deep state will not go willingly or quietly. This is the wealthiest and most damning conspiracy of billionaire war hawks and MK Ultra tapeworms who have been unrestricted by fear of the public since the near-total desolation wrought by classified crimes of state during the Cold War, war on terror, and now war on civil liberties we see under the last several presidencies. The push for war, profiteering, oil invasion, unrestricted greed murdering our biome, aquifers, and forests is not sustainable. We should be happy to sacrifice the Epstein-class political meddling machine if the alternative is children dying in their cradles behind Bronze Age hate of the Abrahamic death cult that has perverted Judaism, Christianity, and Islam into radical elements at a constant gridlock by ghouls who arm all sides while working to topple any manifestation of liberty under the fascist boot of Wall Street, London, and Tel Aviv. As we think about the secret oaths exposed by Cynthia McKinney, the conspiracy shown by William Blum and Christopher Ballin, and the nature of the beast shown by Whitney Webb, we must consider how the Talmudic cabal thinks in their hateful scripture and the overt quotes of the Likud mafia that has infected our media and government with an army of millions of shills. This is not a call to arms against Israel or religion. It is the logical understanding that a clear and present danger is afoot by enemies of the Constitution, foreign and domestic. As the vultures of Oracle, Palantir, Google, Microsoft, Meta, X, and AI-killing platform insects push for mechanized murder of drones, humanoid robots like THX 1138 and Robocop have shown. There is a desire to watch the people, criminalize free speech, harass us with traffic cameras, overreaching banks, or social media bans that disappear people in subtle, almost imperceptible ways that push us ever closer to Skynet doomsday, pandemics, and violation of posse comitatus under guise of immigration or civil unrest propaganda. It has been shown for years that groups like Al-Qaeda, ISIS, Antifa, and imagined left or left-wing militias are the invention of CIA and FBI schemes to enrich their own funding sources, inventing staged terror with groomed victims to be fall guys, to conceal the real threat of ever-growing domestic federal agencies that veil unconstitutional standing armies that are not allowed to operate on U.S. soil. With changes of the Jerusalem embassy, we see Trump willing to drown the oldest Christian community while claiming to represent the evangelicals while working openly to protect the Epstein criminals in tech, Tel Aviv, and Wall Street. This alarming push for political gangsterism, deregulation of corporate antitrust protections, and militarized police state has been going on since Reagan, Clinton, Bush's, Obama, and Biden. Under all these slithering creeps, there has been an effort to push for illegal bioweapons, weaponizing government secrecy, attacks on whistleblowers, and laws like NDAA 2012 that allow for kidnap and torture policies that so far were not used openly until the Trump regime became afraid of its own base following the cover-up of the Epstein conspiracy. Everything warned of in the Chris Hedges NDAA 2012 lawsuit, the Patriot Act, Clinton-era deregulation, and runaway crimes of federal agencies, COVID lockdown, and intentional doom of blue-collar middle-class America, going all the way back to shipping auto manufacturing overseas, while destroying Flint, Michigan, and the Rust Belt's water, has been an incremental push for all the secret police and paperwork checks we once laughed at about Nazi or communist hallmarks of a dying regime on TV. Capitalism has adopted all the symptoms of Al-Qaeda and ISIS as well. Masked thugs with machine guns circling our children, forcing people into lonely deaths away from loved ones. Hundreds of thousands of Mexican children disappeared into the hands of unaccountable and untraceable networks to feed pharma cartels, and even worse ends too sad and sickening to discuss publicly. We have mind control social media openly testing weaponized algorithms, censorship, and working against the ethics of a generation unloyal to Israel wars or false flags intended to take our rights. As so many are asking questions, awake to possibilities never dreamed of by former generations, the risk of a draft and engineered plague to reduce the world's population by 2/3 to serve the evil goals of eugenicist creeps is something even schoolchildren are growing wary of. Remember Bill Gates wanting to weaponize vaccines, or British royals making statements about wanting to reincarnate as a virus to wipe out the poor who can't be controlled as slaves? Keep in mind, under the Talmudic secret religion of the elite, it is taught that there will be a new era of zeo-slavery, mass executions, stonings, and burning children alive for the joy of slime who sell off chosen status behind Masonic rites, and trying to force relationships among the wealthy and renowned to sexual blackmail agents, exposed by birthright and Hollywood nepotism, to compromise every one of any merit or clownish renown in the reality TV circus that has dominated the trash coming from the sports, music, and entertainment industries. We do not worship compromised celebrities, influencers, quirky frontmen in tech to hide the true face of tyranny behind goofy frontmen or manufactured consent for more slaughter, invasion of privacy, price hikes, and distractionary news stories. Despite trying to scrub news stories exposing the calls to wipe out local homeownership in favor of foreign techies, there is too much info out there, memorized, passed on in what we once say publicly, that a new day is coming where the predatory hedge funds who buy up our neighborhoods to make us all rent slaves days are numbered. The names and addresses of the worst criminals are well known. The system predation by corporate mafias, banksters, Wall Street, and techies will come to a point like Mussolini where the will of the public to be free of the New World Order, ruling class double standards, and political dynasties will expose the darkest corners of the federal bureaucracy to the light of transparency and moving past evil policies masked behind innocuous-sounding names. We must take the pressure of the Department of War, ICE, Homeland Security, NSA to wipe out communities no matter who they are or how they are portrayed by the media as unethical, unconstitutional, and the scared tactics of a scared and slithering ruling class whose lies and history of destabilization and regime change will bring about a new Bastille Day, where we subject the torturers, censors, co-conspirators, and war-for-profit schemers to the very toxic policies they thought would terrorize the public under crushing tyranny. There will be no more engineered coups, no more threats of ISIS to check Netanyahu's enemies for free speech. There will be no more plagues or pandemics if we are willing to challenge the suits, soft targets, and money men behind the ruling elite. There must be a fundamental change to move away from divisive Christo-fascist or secular globalist Marxist polarities that move in the same creeping neoliberal push to cripple the future under the march of corporate greed, violation of antitrust protections, and shadowy billionaires seeking to rob of us privacy with cameras in bathrooms, ATMs, and everywhere we eat and breathe, where corporate oligarchy seeks to sell us life and deny us liberty under Stasi tactics. We can look at the calls to sell us the water life needs while polluting our world. How political Zionist creeps seek to criminalize the Bill of Rights and hide the true power of the people behind paywalls, mind control, and conspiratorial cabals of henchmen who try to make us hate their enemies and bleed for profits of draft dodgers and war hawks like Dick Cheney and his vile Genie Energy, Mid-East pipeline behind so much dirty war and invented jihadis who are actually stolen, Yemeni babies trafficked by Tel Aviv. There can be no World War III police state without the willing surrender of the people. The plans of Zionist oligarchy for domestic Milei massacres, turning our cities into prison camps like Sabra and Shatila, can only happen if we continue to pretend to be asleep, as they have done, picking our families off one by one. Remember, everything they are doing to Mexican people is just manufacturing consent for what they want to do to gun owners and vastly different segments of society. Today it's ICE and TSA. Tomorrow it will be turning suburban areas hit with thermobaric weapons like the hundreds of thousands of missing in Gaza. If you allow bombed weddings in Yemen or Gaza, you are saying it's okay to do it in Brooklyn, Bronx, and anywhere the regime can make you believe some distant community deserves to be nuked or drone striked because they had a teacher strike, union picket line, or challenged illegal arming of human rights abusers, or dystopian surveillance kill lists by snide little Zionist child molesters like Peter Thiel and Alex Karp. We reject the false prophets and corrupt teachers on the TV. We don't fall for the false narratives cooked up for puppet presidents by PR firms and lobbyist networks who are theorizing how much the goblins and golems in DC can enact to thwart the will to live free from toilet cameras, mind control programs, biometric prisons, or concentration camps for lost children. There will never be a closer moment to both absolute freedom and the most crushing acts of inhumanity by private security mercenaries and cutouts of vampiric rulers who shiver in delight at the thought of torture, rape, and organ harvest against your family. Do not think the plan ends with Al-Qaeda oil smuggled overland in an Israeli pipeline, turning Gaza into a seaside haven for molestation by Wall Street. This is just the mid-level salvo in a wider and more extreme plot to bring about the kind of injustice and sinister worldview from the Book of Joshua and Talmud, where those called Amalekites turn out to be you. Many Christian and Jews have rung the alarm to the end-stage plans of the secret societies, using proxy war for profit groups to bring about the same cruel policies of the Contras, ISIS, phalangists to burn homes and stab babies in service to settler charities who hate your children and want to sell your wives and daughters into slavery. Learn from history, study FOIA releases, WikiLeaks, Snowden revelations, and follow censored journalists from both polarities who have come to see the threat of foreign bad actors like Laura Loomer, Robert Shillman, Larry Ellison, Miriam Adelson, Ben Shapiro, Dennis Prager, Elon Musk, Mark Zuckerberg, Barry Weiss, and other tapeworms of the Zionist mind control parasite that feeds on the lives of our children. We must be ever vigilant to the curation of reality by Israeli spies and war profiteers who skew narratives by a mission that have stacked the deck against human beings targeted by the Talmudists for centuries. Keep in mind, no other ideology calls for the murder of 99% of humanity. This is a distinct criminal class of billionaire slime who must be overthrown, their financial rackets dissolved, and their dirty money networks broken by hard prison time as war profiteers trade in the most predatory crimes imaginable. Millions have died under the evil schemes of neocon lobbyists who have tried to crash us into oncoming traffic since 1913 Federal Reserve Act. There is no future without dismantling the intelligence cutouts and private sector of Mossad and criminals inciting atrocity. These supremacist goons have encircled the world in militarism, economic abuse and function, with the same kind of gaslighting and threat of violence as an abusive husband who threatens his family into silence with rape and torture. The medical aspect of the CIA and Mossad bleeds into every aspect of our lives as they have incentivized hospitals to bankrupt the sick and eugenicize the poor, much as these same groups traffic vulnerable women and children for organs. The time has come to break the chains of bondage, to overthrow the ruling class and institute new and more meaningful ways of governance in line with the Founding Fathers, bringing true justice and opportunity to those broken by imploded job markets, defunded schools, and dual systems of injustice for the poor. No more billionaire lobbyists or shadow government creeps casting the only vote. We will have liberty or they will have death. We must learn to value the third world as much as we value our own lives, because the predation and pandemics that start there might end here.